Hello there, I'm Elias. Welcome to my channel. If you've been following along with the last two videos I put out, you'll know I've been on kind of a kick of providing you with updates on the current state of BMS. If you haven't, go check them out in the top right. I explain the effects the anniversary edition of Skyrim had on BMS development and what my current plans are for BMS 3 moving forward. In this video, we'll be taking a look far off into the future at the things that I want for the BMS 4 gameplay module. As stated in the first video of this vlog mini-series, the anniversary edition of Skyrim has delayed my work on the gameplay module for a little while, until I decide whether or not to stick with the current version, 1597, of the game, or bite the bullet and build BMS 4 for the 1.6 AE versions. So basically, just keep in mind that these plans are probably a year off or more. Now that that's out of the way, let's start with the general concept of what I want BMS gameplay to look like. I know that there are already a few great mod lists out there when it comes to enhancing Skyrim's gameplay. First and foremost, BMS will not be turning Skyrim into Dark Souls, a loot hoarding and collecting minigame, or keeping gameplay vanilla friendly plus or whatever. Those things have already been done, and I'm not here to copy other people's lists. I'm here to build on the base formula of Skyrim and to enhance it in meaningful ways that make you feel more immersed in the game world. So let me explain now that BMS 4 gameplay will first and foremost be a first-person oriented module. Third-person gameplay will be second to the first-person experience, just as it has always been in the Elder Scrolls titles. You will not see any crazy anime animations, combat roles, or combat mechanics that lend themselves to the Dark Souls genre. Instead, my goal will be to create smooth first-person animations and combat that focus on quick and tense encounters. Your actions should feel aggressively straightforward and powerful. Same goes for the enemies. Thus, you'll see quick times to kill for you and your opponents. Some might call this hardcore. I call it meaningful. Every decision you make will have consequences, and combat won't devolve into 30-minute long bash battles. Enemies will hopefully take every opportunity to kill you and not stand around waiting for you to make the first move. Along with a consequence-driven combat system such as this, care will need to be taken to avoid repetitive player behaviors, the chief among them being quick saving and quick loading. Now, what most hardcore mods that are already available do is simply remove the player's ability to perform these actions. I find this solution is only a half measure and doesn't address the real problem of such a system. While yes, removing saving and loading from the player can prevent them from using those, stubborn players will actually circumvent those game systems entirely. It mostly just leads to frustration with the autosave mechanics. Besides, if the game autosaves for you anyway, and you get to replay the last 5 minutes prior to death, what's the point? Nobody likes having their time wasted, and replaying things you did 30 minutes ago, no matter how hardcore you call it, is just a waste of time. That's the real problem here. In a game that encourages new experiences and gameplay frequently, a system like saving and loading does the exact opposite. So how do you prevent this, you might ask? Well, just remove death entirely. Replaying what you did half an hour ago step by step should never be a consequence to failure. While yes, this system is tricky to implement in Skyrim, it can certainly be done well. Since saves and loads lead to brute forcing, a consequence for death shouldn't be another opportunity to brute force. Instead, consequences for failing a combat encounter should be lost items, decreased stats, or long walks back to the dungeon, but enemies should never reset. This will give players a greater opportunity to try other parts of the game instead of pushing through an area that is over-leveled for them. Speaking of over-leveled, I'm going to be removing as much of the enemy level scaling as possible. That's just a terrible gameplay mechanic in general, I think. Let's think about it. If your injuries actively made you worse at using your weapon and you had to train them back, would you return to that same dungeon? Maybe you were temporarily lower on health and moved slower for 30 minutes as if injured. Or if you lost your Daedric artifact to a bandit and then had an opportunity to retrieve it later. Wouldn't that be fun? It's meaningful and dynamic consequence-driven interactions like these that I want to chase with BMS. Repetition can certainly be fun, just look at the last 3 Hitman games, but if the base system isn't designed for it, there really isn't a reason to have it. As for skills and character progression, I have some thoughts too. Since Oblivion, Bethesda Game Studio games have had static time to difficulty progression, meaning the difficulty of the game didn't really change much over time since the game leveled with you. By removing level scaling, we can create decreasing exponential or even decreasing linear difficulty progression, meaning that over time, the game becomes easier. To me, this makes sense intuitively because the idea is that your character grows as he becomes more powerful, but initially his journey is difficult. There are many things that can facilitate this kind of gameplay, but one of my favorite concepts for this so far is removing certain abilities from the player, initially, and locking them behind perks. Maybe initially a character isn't able to wield certain types of armor or equip certain weapons until he learns the basic use of that equipment. Maybe things like sprinting are impossible until a character unlocks them. Maybe certain playstyles don't need sprinting at all and choose not to unlock it. What if a character cannot cast any spells until they discover magic, or only use scrolls once they are able to read them? There are so many possibilities for this. A general rule of thumb, though, that I want to pursue is that perks unlock new gameplay, while skill level represents power in those types of gameplay. Unfortunately, I don't think many skill overhauls utilize this nearly to the extent I would like. Understandably so, as implementing this is very difficult, but it certainly is still possible. Another thing that I would definitely remove is infinite leveling. When a character is able to do everything under the sun, it removes the incentive for replaying the game. To encourage this, perks could have certain drawbacks. For example, maybe a perk that unlocks a powerful destructive mage ability prevents the character from ever being able to wield healing magic. Or maybe counteracting this negative effect later could be possible, but only at a steep cost. Again, choice-driven consequences and rewards are kind of the entire idea behind the system. Of course, there are many other ideas I have, like introducing piety to the game, modifying loot tables, adding new skill trees, and so forth, so it's really impossible to get all the ideas into a single video, and it's probably best that I don't anyway. I don't know if I'll actually be able to implement all these things, but I can at least hope and dream, can't I? Anyway, if you like this video, like it, that really helps me out. Subscribe, and go check out the last videos if you haven't yet. Let me know any ideas you have for BMS gameplay below. Really curious about your thoughts. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I'll see you in the next video.